Hi, everyone. Welcome to Promoting Educator Resiliency through SEL. We're going to be talking about coping with challenges, uncertainty, and trauma, things that all of us have been dealing with this school year. My name is Dr. Jessica Werner, and I am coming to you semi-live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Before we get started, please find something to write with and to write on. You're going to want to take some notes, and I'm going to be giving you the opportunity to pause the video and take part in some activities. So find something to write with and write on. I always recommend pen to paper rather than just typing or taking notes on your phone, because it is a self-awareness activity to be able to write what you're thinking. We can actually type faster than we think. So it helps slow your brain down and focus on one thing. I would love to know who comes and listens. And because we can't be together in the same room at the same time or even simultaneous, please send me a quick email and just say who you are, what school you work at, what your position is. I'm such a relationship-driven person, and I love hearing from the people who attend my presentations and my workshops. So I'd love to hear who you are and where you're coming from today. And on the screen, we have, I was going to say the first, but we just had one. We have the second of many pictures where I use my children in this presentation. And I think just my own children's experiences of schooling through COVID, living through COVID has been so enlightening for me as a parent and as an educator that I share some of their stories with you today. So I don't know if you can see my husband. I run a consulting business. It is called North Shore Coaching and Consulting. It is out of the Twin Cities, but I work with schools all over the country. I have school partners all over. And the whole point of what I do is just helping teachers thrive, helping schools thrive by ultimately helping teachers to thrive. So I do a lot of instructional coaching, a lot of PDs. Right now, much of it is virtual. But my goal is just to keep good teachers in the profession. And that is I do a lot of work around instruction, classroom management, and now wellness. So I'm a former teacher, you can see I've taught all over, and I've been teaching in the education department at the College of St. Scholastica in Minnesota for the last 10 years. So I've been teaching classroom management and working with pre-service teachers. And most importantly, right now, I am the mother to a third grader and a kindergartner. And my husband also works in education. And we have a child in a Catholic school. We have a child in a public school, excuse me. So, and I work mostly in private parochial schools. So we're experiencing this from many different angles. And my own children are experiencing it in many different ways. So if you hear what I say and you are interested in receiving more information, this is where my approach this is the birth of my approach. It's hybrid. It's two different programs. The first is called Personal Leadership, which is a leadership program that focuses on creating intentional leadership by leading from the self before leading others. And the other is Search Inside Yourself, which is an institute housed in Google. Google was one of the pioneers in this kind of self-awareness realm many years ago, and they offer Search Inside Yourself institutes all over the country. There is also a book. Each one has a book. I'm not affiliated with these books, but I highly recommend both if you're interested in further reading. So our objectives today are discuss what's been going on. We're going to discuss our current situation. We're going to understand how what we're doing is informed by social emotional learning and collective trauma. And then we're going to create a vision statement, and you are going to leave having created a goal that you can implement right away in your school context. There are many SEL presentations for you to choose from in this conference, which is awesome. A few years ago, it would have been a really different story. And I think you'll find that our work there's not a ton of overlap, but there is a lot of it that's going to complement each other. So hopefully if you're checking out 1 or if you're checking out 5, you walk away with lots of great information you can implement right away for yourself, for your students, for your staff. So this is what we're going to do first. I want to take a moment for you to just think about, in all of this crazy, and it has been crazy for a year, what is going really well right now at your school? What is going well? So go ahead and you can hit pause every time there's a reflection activity, and then just unpause when you're finished. Okay, what is going really well right now at school? This is to get us in a mindset of thinking about the positive, because this has been a hard year. But you know what? There is a light. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I know from kind of the meta perspective I have working in many schools, so many things have changed for the better that I think it's really important to focus on what is good. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. So we started out with that question very intentionally. Because since March, we are at the bottom of this pyramid. When we talk about Maslow, we all learned about Maslow, we're down at the bottom. All of us, in some shape or form, have been impacted by the trauma of COVID. It looks different for everyone. And I work with a lot of people who tell me, oh, I'm fine. And sometimes the thing about trauma, and if you've watched some of these other presentations, it doesn't present immediately. Sometimes it catches up to you later. So we will see. We will see how it plays out. But some of you know you have already seen things in your students and in your loved ones that are definitely trauma informed. So thinking about ourselves and our students being at the bottom of this pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and really the function of schools this year, number 1 has been to meet the safety needs of the students. School should be a safe place where they get access to loving, caring staff and consistency in their schedules and their lives. This is a safe haven for students right now, and it's a safe haven for a lot of us educators. How many of you felt great when you finally walked back in the building and you had students? I mean, that's what we signed up for. So, but even in doing that, we're doing that worrying about our health, worrying about our safety. And so I think it's important to just remind ourselves that this is not normal times. And it started to feel like a new normal. And I've been telling people for months, you don't have to call it that, because this is not normal. So just remember, actually, there's a brand new book out that, of course, I can't think of the name right off the top of my head, but it reimagines the hierarchy of needs into a sailboat. And at the bottom of the boat are the safety and physiological needs. And he says that the boat can't sail. So you can't sail off to esteem or self-actualization until you have those needs met at the bottom. So just really important to keep in our minds as we think about how we've been impacted. So SEL, you are getting lots of introductions to SEL, but there are 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making. When I did all my training through personal leadership and Search Inside Yourself, especially Google was big on the leadership piece. How did these competencies create good leaders? How does it help employee performance? But right now, given our situation and our own needs, I focus on well-being. So what do these 5 competencies do to help impact our well-being? And I'm really going to focus on self-awareness today. Self-awareness and a little self-management, because I truly believe that if you don't have a foundation of self-awareness, it's impossible to do the rest. So if I don't understand how I'm feeling about something, how do I self-manage? And then what does that do to my social awareness? If I don't know what's going on, how am I socially? Does it influence my relationship skills? A lot of us have seen just relationships shift over the last 11, 12 months. And if I'm having a moment or if I'm feeling triggered, it's not the time for me to be making responsible decisions. So really all these things I see as kind of building on self-awareness, and that's where I start with you today. So just important to know what's happening in your brain when you're living through some type of trauma or stress. Trauma or stress. So this is a very simple explanation. I use it with adults and children all the time. And I'm going to give you the quick rundown. But if your brain is your hand, your thumb is your amygdala, and the amygdala is the alarm center of your brain. It acts on instinct. It tells you when there's danger. It is what has kept humans alive for thousands of years, the amygdala. It senses danger. Cortisol fills our bodies, and it triggers a fight or flight response. And fight or flight is what has kept us safe. So back in the caveman times, you leave your cave, you hear rustling in the bushes, your amygdala gets triggered, cortisol fills your body, you're ready to protect your family from the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes. Okay, that is what the amygdala's function is. However, so that we don't, as this graphic says, flip your lid, we have the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is what says, oh, no, 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 no. It's okay, calm down. It's a rustling in the bushes. It's because it's windy, okay? So instead of triggering fight or flight, our prefrontal cortex is the wise leader. It regulates our amygdalas. But what happens when you're living through stress or trauma is that it's harder to regulate. It's harder to self-regulate. And people are finding that they're a lot more triggered more often. So, and you might have seen some of this in yourself or with your students. Things are causing this that wouldn't normally bring you to that point. So maybe you're driving in traffic, somebody cuts you off. A year ago, you would have been annoyed, but today, boom, laying on the horn. Okay, so this is because this is a neurological thing that's happening in your brain, and it's due to the cortisol that's flooding your body. And the cortisol is an important hormone because it helps us to act. However, it's not a hormone that is supposed to be in our bodies for a year. Okay, it's supposed to come and it's supposed to go. And so we're starting to feel the effects of having increased cortisol in our bodies. And this is happening a lot more often. A lot of people just aren't at their best right now. So very short explanation to a very complicated process in the brain. The other thing to know about the amygdala is that it hasn't evolved over time. So I give the example of the caveman. Our amygdala is doing the same thing now and alerting us to trouble when so many times trouble isn't life or death, okay? There's not a saber-toothed tiger outside in my bushes. My prefrontal cortex helps me to know that. But our amygdalas are acting the same way they always have. So we need to spend time and energy on the regulation. Otherwise, this is what happens, okay? So self-awareness and SEL is about that self-regulation, okay? Helping us regulate so that when we're faced with challenge, we can act as our best selves. And we are going to identify who that person is in a bit. This is from the New York Times last summer. The threats we feel that are real and perceived, they act on us like trauma. We're activated, hypervigilant, anxious, triggered. We're exhibiting all the symptoms of complex PTSD. And again, this doesn't apply to everyone equally. Everybody's having their own lived experience here. But some of what we're seeing are things that doctors see who work with PTSD patients. And that is because of this global issue that we're all living through, global trauma of COVID. So why learn about neuroscience and SEL? And oh yeah, this is another thing. I have so many neuroscience resources if you are interested. It helps with so many things. And in another time, I would be talking about academic performance. But right now, when talking about emotional regulation, it helps us regulate. It increases our ability to pay attention. So many people are telling me right now, my students have a short attention span. I have a short attention span. This is part of what's happening in our brains. Okay, this is a normal consequence. And having these practices decreases the cortisol, which helps us increase regulation. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your students? Having these SEL practices helps us, it gives us tools to handle challenging situations. It helps decrease stress and burnout. And there are studies out there that have done SEL work with teachers, and they see the teacher burnout rates dropping, which is amazing. And if you are an admin, or if you are a teacher, or if you are a parent, it helps you to model. It helps you to model what you want from your students or your faculty or your children. Okay, how can we expect children to be regulated if we're not? And so it gives us the opportunity to model. And it helps increase our resilience. So resiliency is the ability to get through something hard and the lessons that we learn that make us stronger. And for those of us who have practices where we're able to help our regulation, it helps increase your resiliency. You can't control the world, but you can control these things within yourself. And that's part of resilience, is focusing on what you can control. So just to wrap up this section, our brains are scrambled. They're scrambled like in this picture. I really like this picture. When your brain is experiencing trauma, it's scrambled. We're in survival mode. I mean, you guys know you're in survival mode as teachers. We've been there since March. We're going to be activated. We have the cortisol until COVID is after, but it doesn't disappear right away. So we're going to be seeing the effects of this and maybe even feeling it personally for a very long time. How is it impacting our students? And I would say, how are we all being impacted? This is what I'm hearing everywhere I go, and I'm seeing a lot of it for myself. One of the more interesting things people are reporting is students falling fast asleep in the middle of class. And teachers saying this is just not normal. And this is big kids, this is little kids, but that's what happens. It's a trauma response. Your brain needs a break. So I see kids falling asleep at school. Lower energy in general, although I needed to add to the slide, sometimes it affects people by increasing their energy. I have one of these children in my house. My 6-year-old has been bouncing off the walls for about 9 months. Okay, so it can go one way with a low energy, or it can go the other way with a high energy. It looks different. It presents different in everyone. Lack of focus, having a hard time concentrating, more emotional or reactive than normal. More emotional or reactive than normal. Attention-seeking behaviors, that is my way of saying there's been some classroom management issues because children, there are some attention-seeking behaviors happening. And again, a lot of it is like a brain break. You act out, gives your brain a break. But all of these are things that I know people are witnessing in schools and maybe even within yourself or your own family right now. Whew, a lot of information. Okay, that was the heavy lifting. Now you're like, what do I do? How can I help? Let's start. First of all, I highly encourage doing some SEL check-ins with your students. And I'm going to give you a few examples. If you are an administrator, you can do these with your staff. You can do these in your family. I'm going to give you some examples that I use in my own family. Here we go. Some people have a hard time naming emotions, okay? Not only children, some adults do too. So I like the idea of allowing students to pick a color that corresponds to how they're feeling that day. A middle school teacher I worked with did this with her health class. They walked in, they picked a color, you know, here, red was angry, blue was sad. They would write their name on the back, drop it in the basket, sit down. Their teacher would come look at the basket, and she was able to kind of take the temperature of the room and know what her middle schoolers were bringing in with them that day. I thought this was brilliant. Not a word was spoken. Nobody had to say an emotion, but they picked a color. And then what she did when she had full baskets, she created a mosaic in her room. And I said, why do you have that up? Is it for decoration? And she said, I want to normalize feelings for my students. I want them to know that if they're having a blue day, they can look at the wall and see, well, I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way. So I thought this was a brilliant idea. This is adapted from a trauma-informed curriculum called Miss Kendra. You could do it, I call it a worry check-in. You can do it as a worry basket. But this was done in a second grade class, and each child entered the classroom every day, and part of their morning routine was putting their clip on where they were on this worry chart. No worries, some worries, a lot of worries, because what we know about trauma is that worries make it hard to learn. And so this was in my daughter's class. The kids checked in every day, and their teacher, he would check in too. Again, it's about modeling. I really like this idea. Another way to maybe not have to name emotions, we might not know exactly how we're feeling, but if we see a picture of cute animals, we might identify with one or two of them. So showing, and people I've shared this with, I've been giving different versions of this presentation to groups all over the country this year. These memes that I'm going to show you are a huge hit. Think about it right now. Which animal are you? Are you a happy cat? Are you an upside down panda? You know, giving people time and space to check in. You can do this virtually, put a number in the chat. When I give virtual workshops, and I often do this as a check-in, and I can scroll the chat and take a temperature. You can do this in person. And if you can't get enough of that, this one is all Chihuahuas. This is my personal favorite, and we have this printed out at home, and it's on our fridge because my 6-year-old has a really hard time with his emotions. We are doing a lot, and I mean a lot of work around self-awareness and self-regulation. He cannot, I shouldn't say he cannot, he's getting there. He's getting to the point where he's occasionally able to name an emotion, but mostly he can't. But he can look at this chart of adorable Chihuahuas and tell me if he's feeling like Chihuahua number 5. Or starting, and by the way, you can do all these with big kids, little kids, adults. I do them with everyone. You can go around your room. Everybody name one emotion that you're bringing into class with you today, or a feeling. You get one word from everyone. It takes 2 minutes. And again, it's giving you the chance to take the temperature of the room. Art and trauma, I'm sure you'll hear about this from another presentation. Such interesting information about how art helps us process the trauma, and it actually helps us remember better. So it increases self-awareness. And so I was at a trauma-informed schools online symposium, and the woman presenting was recommending allowing kids to draw and doodle during lectures, if you lecture, because there's actually a connection between the learning that's happening. So I do a lot of art and drawing. If I know my son has had a hard day, and I also know that if I say, what happened today, I'm not going to get the answer. Sometimes if we sit down and draw together, things end up coming out. All right, this is the second part of what we're doing, and it is a visioning activity. You will need a piece of paper for this. And as I go through, feel free to hit pause at the places where you are going to be doing something, okay? First things first. Please briefly write about a situation that occurred recently or semi-recently at school with a parent or a student or a colleague, where the way you showed up, maybe you got triggered, something triggered you, and whatever happened, you weren't happy with the way you acted. Maybe you said something you didn't mean to, maybe you jumped. I know for me, it's defensiveness. I get really defensive. What happened? And if you can't think of anything, think of a time where if I said, you can go back in time on your time machine and take a do-over, and a situation where you would do that. So go ahead and press pause and try and write about that for a few minutes. Okay, now we're going to flip the script. You would have written about your situation where you didn't show up as your best self, but now I want you to think of a time when you were your best self, when you walked into school, got out of your car, and you were on your game. We all have those days. Sometimes they're few and far between, but you know what I'm talking about. I want you to make a list right now. I want you to pause and make a list of the words that describe who you are when you are at your best. And your goal is 10 words. So on those super good days when you're really on your game, which words describe you? This is the list. In workshops, we do this kind of as a group. I elicit responses from everyone because it's hard. Sometimes it's just hard to think up words on the spot. Okay, now you're going to narrow down however many you came up with to 5, and these are going to be your 5 for right now. You're not committed for life, but these are your 5 for right now, and you're going to fill in this template. So again, go ahead and pause and write down your name. I want to show up each day, the 5 ways, the 5 things that make you your best self. And so that, and the so that is the most important part here. This is your why. Why are you here? Why are you working in Catholic schools? There are easier ways to make a living. There are easier ways to make money, but there's a reason why you're here. There's a reason why you come back, if you come back every year. So I really want you to tap into that. What keeps you here? What keeps you here? Because in a year like this, we need to remember. So go ahead and pause and fill in the vision statement. All right, in the spirit of modeling, I always share mine. This is my vision statement. During this coming school year, I should clarify, I wrote this at the beginning of August, just as I was starting to do workshops again, in person, online with teachers. I sat down and I wrote this vision statement about who I would be as my best self this school year. So I said, I want to show up each day present, engaged, resourceful, joyful, and kind to myself, so that I can give my best to those with whom I work. Okay, so for me, these words change. My best looks different, but I knew in this school year, the reason I do what I do, just like the reason you do what you do, you all have your own reasons, but I work in education because I care deeply about these students. I mean, I have skin in the game too now. I have children in school. And I care very deeply about the experience of the teachers because I spent many years as a teacher and they were hard. Some of those years were really hard. And so I work in schools so that I can give my best to teachers. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. So for me, that means being present, being in the moment today, not thinking about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow. Right now, I'm presenting to you, I'm right here. I have to be engaged and resourceful. These have come up all the time. What do you do when we get onto Zoom and something doesn't work? This happens all the time. You have to come up with ideas, right? So I need to be present, engaged, and resourceful to be able to keep moving. I'm choosing to do it with joy, although some days that is hard to come by. There's some very, very hard days right now, but I'm trying to intentionally choose joy. And I'm trying to be kind to myself. I'm trying to forgive myself when things aren't perfect, because I can be a perfectionist, as many of you can also be. I know you educators. I work with many of you. Now is not the time for perfection. So I have to be kind to myself when the Zoom camera doesn't turn on or, whatever it is. So this is my vision statement. This is an important part of the exercise. I want you to apply it. I want you to think back to that situation where you would take a do-over, but think about it as this person. So if you showed up as this person, how might it have changed the outcome? How might you have changed your behavior? Okay, this is a self-awareness activity. This is an SEL self-awareness activity. We're doing it retroactively, but if you practice this enough, you'll start doing it in the moment. And you'll start mentally tuning in when you're confronting a challenge. All right, who do I want to be right now? How do I want to show up to this parent-teacher conference? How do I want to show up to the line of 100 people in the grocery store? How do I want to show up when I'm confronted with challenge? Because I have a choice. take this graphic and put it in a place where you can see it. I work with schools, they have it in the faculty room. Some of my teachers have it in their classrooms, because this is what happens. This is life. Life throws challenge at us in the form of a parent-teacher conference or a line at the grocery store, or you show up and there's a parent waiting outside your office who you weren't expecting. I don't know why I keep saying parent, maybe from my own past experiences, but anyway, and, or, you know, whatever, you show up to school, and this happened in one of my schools recently, the internet's down and half your students are remote. What do? Okay, you're faced with a challenge. Instinctually, you react, okay? Boom, this is your instinct. Your instinct is fight or flight. It is cortisol. It is to react. But the more we work on the self-awareness practices, the more you try and tune into your vision day after day after day, you develop the ability to regulate so that instead of reacting, you mindfully respond. Okay? And there is a difference. Reacting is just what your body and mind is telling you to do. It's what has kept humans safe for all these years. Responding is done with intention. Responding is done with self-awareness. I know I'm responsible for what I'm about to say right now. I'm going to act as my best. That is the difference. And that is what doing activities like this and keeping them somewhere you can see them and use them. You can do it with your students. I've done this with kids of all ages. You can adapt it. You can do this for situations. If you have a particularly challenging situation coming up, write a vision statement for it, okay? I mean, maybe you need different words for different things, and that makes sense. But the idea is to strengthen these capabilities so that when you're faced with challenge, you can respond. It's react or respond. Now think about, how can I bring my vision into school with me tomorrow or next period? How can I bring my vision into school with me? Pause the video and write about it for a few minutes. How can this make a difference in your life as an educator? Because this is what we need to keep considering over and over. Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be as a teacher? We identified our whys. We know why we're here. We know why we show up. Who do I want to be? And how can I be that person? And who is responsible for that person? Just you, okay? So when we take out all the external things that are happening, the COVID and the traffic and the weather, we still get to decide how we show up every single day. That is our choice. Okay, and how can that impact your classroom? I encourage you all to take good care of yourselves, do a little self-care. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be expensive, but give yourself time and space for activities like the one we just did. Do whatever it takes to recharge your batteries. Again, that is a resilience practice that helps you regulate. When you're faced with challenge, it's gonna give you more ability to respond instead of react. Again, doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be time consuming. I love this quote. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. This is the work of SEL. What can I do? What kind of work can I do here so I'm better for my students, so I'm better for my family? Now I want you, after you hear the instructions, to pause and write a goal. I want you to come up with the SMART goal. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. As specific as possible is where you want to go. For a way you can start practicing self-awareness with yourself, with your students. It could be SEL check-ins, something you can do after this presentation and implement what you have learned into your daily life. Go ahead and take a minute and make sure you write a SMART goal for yourself. This is a picture this is a teacher I've been working with for several years, and this is what our work has looked like during COVID. It's wearing masks, it's sitting far apart. She has found herself in a very challenging teaching situation where she now has a multi-age class. She has 5th and 6th grade. And so we talk about these things a lot. This is hard. It's challenging every day. What can we do to get through this year? How do we create resilience? Thank you for being with me. Again, I'd love to know who shows up. Feel free to send me an email. Check out my website. Again, my practice is called North Shore Coaching and Consulting. Thanks for all of your work that you're doing as Catholic school teachers. You guys are amazing. And yeah, everyone take care. Bye.